Hello, I'm Dr. John Cruz, and today's topic is how to talk about your ADHD. So I will be talking less than 20 minutes. If you have questions or comments while I'm talking, you can certainly type them in. I will address them at the end of the time, and this will be posted both on Facebook and eventually on YouTube. So unlike some of the other topics I've talked about where I'm trying to present factual information and making it clear what's known and true, this topic is much more philosophical in sort of my opinion, and what I'm going to be providing are guidelines or things to think about, not hard and fast rules, because I think every situation is going to be individualistic, but I think there's some helpful things to consider. And although, and a couple of different people asked me to talk about this, the thrust of it, or the most of what I'll be addressing directly, is more how to talk about your ADHD in the workplace. I think much of what I say is also pertinent to coming out about your ADHD at school, at family, or with friends. So there's a broad range of scenarios where this may be pertinent. So the first thing, in sort of echoing what I just said with the coming out reference, is that one is that this is your information. This is personal information about you. If you don't want to share it, you don't have to. Now, if you are asking for accommodations or special considerations, then there may be situations that actually require you to divulge this. But otherwise, this is, again, personal information about you. If you don't want to be talking about it with anyone, if you don't want to be sharing it, if you don't want to be letting people into your realm of what you consider private, you don't have to in this country and much of the planet. And again, I made the analogy to sort of outing yourself, like people in the LGBT community have had to do for generations, because the norm or the standard is assuming you are cisgendered and heterosexually oriented, and people who deviate from that have to come out or reveal themselves. And people with ADHD, again, don't have to come out and reveal themselves, but have the option or choice to. But that sort of also introduces the fact that this is, while the attribute of yourself having ADHD is a personal attribute, some of those attributes, characteristics, are probably already being displayed in the general world or in public. So there may well be people who have insight or awareness or know that you have ADHD before you have revealed it yourself. There are others who will be completely clueless. There will be some who, even after you've acknowledged it and talked about it, are completely not believing or not accepting of it. And that can be in family and household situations as well as in the workplace. So again, first point, it's private. It's only yours to share if you want to share it with others. So number two is, I think it's really important to think about why you want to share it. And I think very often the hope is, or the desire is, that if I share this aspect of me, it was going to change people's feelings or opinions of me. You're going for how people feel about you. And those may well change, but I'd say you are on much firmer ground and you have much higher likelihood of success if you focus on what you want, what information you want to convey, and what you want people to understand about you. So again, if you're promoting understanding, you have a moderate degree of achieving it. If your goal is to make your boss like you, make your mother-in-law appreciate you, this piece of information may not do that. They may even have a deeper understanding of you and still not like you. So again, focusing on why you're trying to share this information, what you're trying to accomplish. And clearly, if you're seeking accommodations, and we'll get to that in a minute or two, then it is probably important to be direct in sharing it. So 3, when you're talking about ADHD, I think it's important to bring up specific examples of things that you do, that you know you're doing in that setting or workplace, and how you see them fitting into the ADD framework, and to not over-assume that people know too much about ADHD, so that the word or the term is out there. It's ubiquitous, at least in Western societies and on the internet worldwide. But there's a huge swath of people who think it's sort of just something trivial, and the famous quote is, "Oh, there's a squirrel." That it's just an aspect of inattention, that it's just trivial, that that's a narrow range of what it's affecting in life. A somewhat more informed but still narrow viewpoint is that it's just involving cognitive functions, attention, concentration. So it's useful to educate people that a much broader range of executive functions, how your brain processes information, how it decides what to share or not share, impulse control, organization, not just distractibility, but sustaining attention, switching attention, how you work, impulsivity. So it's useful, again, to use general terms, but to say, when I'm starting out in a conversation with you at work and I'm initially attentive and then I'm drifting off, that is part of my ADD. And so the other part of explaining the ADD, I think it's really important to highlight what it isn't. And it is useful to highlight that it isn't correlated with intelligence. And one of my previous talks months ago was on it, so you can look it up. There's sort of an outside world assumption, or non-ADDs, that people who are displaying signs of ADHD are behaving in ways that are stupid. And certainly we saw this in a certain past president, Donald Trump, where lots of times when he didn't make careless mistakes, didn't pay attention to, didn't get his facts right, didn't think before he spoke, did things impulsively, he was accused of being an idiot or a moron, even by his own cabinet members. That can, again, some of his behavior looked like lack of intelligence. On the other hand, going the other direction, if you look at some of the ADD groups online, and their frequent questions on Quora about why, the assumption is, and the claim is, that people with ADHD are all above average intelligence, that they're all smarter, that this is a superpower. And again, the data I reviewed elsewhere suggests that the range of intelligences among people with ADHD is fairly broad and fairly looks like the normal distribution, which is most people are pretty close to average. There's some people with way below average intelligence and some with way above average intelligence with ADD. But the point I'm getting at is ADHD doesn't equate with intelligence, doesn't have anything to do with intelligence. It's helpful to tell your boss or your family that. It also doesn't have a strong correlation with, having ADHD does not correlate with not wanting to get your work done or being lazy. So neither your your interest in accomplishing a task or your actually accomplishing it. So ADHD can certainly affect your ability to finish a task, but it does not mean that you don't desire or want to get that done. It doesn't mean you're lazy or not interested in getting it done. And one phrase that resonates a lot with many of the people I've worked with and is helpful in offering, again, to bosses, coworkers, or others, the phrase is, people with ADHD are interest-driven rather than importance-driven. So you can know that that assignment is due for the team by Tuesday night, and you can know and appreciate that's important, and you can still get distracted with doom scrolling or moving your car or loading the dishwasher or completely irrelevant tasks that you know aren't important but somehow are more interesting in the moment and interfered with getting things done. Another shorthand, and this highlights sort of the inattentive aspect of ADHD, but telling people that this explains why I go off track, why I get off track all the time. That can be helpful for people. So when you're educating people, I would keep it short, keep it to specific examples, but also give some guiding overarching principles like the executive function one, that's not equating with desire, it's not equating with intelligence or motivation, that it's interest. People with ADHD are interest-driven. If you have favorite podcasts or websites with information. If you have favorite books, you can certainly suggest that. But I'd say other than maybe parents and partners, I would not have a high likelihood that someone else in your life, in the periphery of your life maybe, is going to be motivated enough to go do much research on their own. So if they ask, you can even offer without them asking, but to expect they'll actually follow up and read it and do it, even if they don't have ADHD, I wouldn't count on too strongly. I think I'm on the fourth general principle now. The fourth general principle, and some of this is getting back to why do you want to share it? I mean, probably you want to share news about your ADHD either because you think it will, again, help with understanding with coworkers or friends about how you're working or why you're always late or why you are doing something. So when you're discussing it, I think it's always a helpful rule to focus on not how it's causing problems or preventing you from getting things done. I mean, that can be part of the conversation, but the more you frame things in terms of you are aware of what the common goals are, you have shared values or shared goals with the team or your boss or your mother-in-law or your brother or your dorm mates or whoever it is, that you're not just bringing this up as an excuse. Again, so this is more an explanation, which is not an excuse, but that you are aware of what the common goals are, that you are working to get this product done for your team. You're working to have these reports ready so that everything can be presented to the boss. You are interested in keeping your work or living space clean because that makes it better for the whole neighborhood environment. So again, the more you can focus on and make it clear that you are aware of what the common goals are, the more likely you are to embrace a cooperative spirit on whoever you're talking with. And again, so conveying that you share an interest in this team or this group succeeding, that's why you're talking about this, so they know more effective, efficient ways to communicate or work with you, so you are ready and prepared to produce whatever the team or the goal or the family is trying to work on or produce. And that's feeding directly into my next point, and that is in the situation of where you are asking for specific accommodations. I don't particularly like the term accommodations because the term accommodations implies that your business, your workspace, or family members or whoever are making an extra huge effort. It's a burden on them to do something special for you that other people don't merit, don't deserve, don't warrant or get, and that it's deviating from the whole fabric of the corporation, the family, our values or ethos. We've made a big exception for you. So the word I prefer, and sometimes it's hard to contort it around, but usually it works, is that this is an efficiency, not necessarily an accommodation. This is what you're asking the people around you to do to help you work more efficiently so that you can be productive, so that you can hit your goals, so that you can mesh more smoothly, synchronize with your team, with your classmates, with your business partners, with whatever group you're trying to work with, and that their understanding of how your brain works that may be different than theirs helps them feed you the right information, check that things are on track, understand what's going on when you might get off track, that it doesn't mean you hate what they're doing, it doesn't mean you're not interested in what they're doing. So again, framing things as efficiencies is often more helpful than framing things as accommodations. And getting back to this, whether it's an efficiency or an accommodation, the more specific you can ask people to do something, the more likely they are going to be able to do it, and the more they understand why it's helpful or why it's appropriate, the more they're likely to do it. So if you know you have a tendency to wander off in conversations and you're leading the presentation, you can ask coworkers, you can ask superiors, you can ask inferiors to, step in and rein in, or you can even have phrases as, like, let's get back to X, Y, or Z. helps keep you on track. And again, if you frame it ahead of time, it's not going to be viewed as an impertinence or an inappropriate comment. If you're asking for, to wear your earbuds in the workplace so that you can have a noise-free environment, or at least noise-reduced environment, it's not because you're rude or you're antisocial or X, Y, or Z. It's because, again, this is helping you be more efficient, to devote your energy to the task, to the work at hand, not intended to alienate or separate you from your colleagues. So the other thing I'd say is, if you've decided to take the step to talking about people, again, either work or family or social groups about it, I would always, as part of that initial discussion, plan for a time or one, convey that you are open to feedback and open to follow-up, that if people see you doing X, Y, or Z, it's okay to point that out, or okay to use some tools or tips to rein you in, or just okay to follow up later to see how things are working with the new efficiencies you've installed, and also okay for them to ask, we've been focusing on you drifting off when you're making presentations, but I also see that when you're talking one-on-one with me, after about 2 minutes, your eyes glaze over, or if we're Zooming, I can see that you're playing Tetris or something else on your computer at the same time. What would be useful for me to say at that moment, or how can we deal with that when I see that coming up, or how can I bring you back into the conversation, or how can I double check to make sure that you're present, even if you have adopted a good strategy of keeping eye contact and looking like you're attentive when you're not. And many people with ADHD are good at nodding and shaking their heads, yeah, I'm paying attention, when they're doing something completely different. So again, making people comfortable with providing further feedback, checking in with you. Now, certainly, if it turns out that you're becoming the office resource for ADHD and other maybe related conditions, and that's a drain on your time, you can certainly say, here are the references. You seem really interested in this. Go read it yourself, rather than taking hours of my time. So again, you just because you are identified with having a condition does not mean it is your duty or job to educate the world about it. If you want to, if you like to, great. If it helps people around you understand, if it helps you understand yourself better, great. So one other related issue here, which is particularly in the workplace, many people are terrified of, if I bring this up, then they're going to fire me because I have ADHD. So first of all, we know many successful workers have ADHD. Again, something like, depending on the survey, somewhere in studies, somewhere to 3 to 5% of the adult population is dealing with substantial, significant ADHD. Many of those people are in the workplace. Many of them are succeeding. So don't assume, again, that people will assume that just because you have it, that you're not doing your job or are fireable. The American with Disabilities Act, and at least in California and most of the states I'm aware of, there are state laws, there are federal laws, actually, that give you additional protection once you have revealed a condition such as ADHD that has a biological basis, is a medical condition. It is actually much harder to fire you, particularly if they are firing you for traits or attributes or tasks or things that aren't done that are directly explainable and due to your ADHD. And I've had at least 2 patients in the last, over more than a decade, who have won job-related workplace discrimination lawsuits because they were treated inappropriately and accommodations weren't made. One of them was a person was actually fired as a result of their ADHD, it was a result of their behavior, but their employer was aware that they had ADHD and was not using that understanding to comprehend why the worker was working the way they were working. So again, rather than this being a way to jeopardize your job, it often is a way to help protect your job. And again, not only are there restrictions on firing, but they are required to make reasonable accommodations. Now, what's or reasonable efficiencies to help you complete your tasks at work. So that's about all that I've prepared today. So next week's topic is overdiagnosis of ADHD. Is it really a major problem? I mean, that's been an ongoing charge or accusation for the last 30 plus years about ADHD, that it's widely overdiagnosed. And there was a recent paper published in a well-respected journal that was furthering this claim. So I will address that next week. Stay healthy, stay happy. I am not seeing any messages right now, so I will be signing off. Have a good week.